All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. We've got a quorum. Since this is our first DRB meeting with an application, I'd like the board to introduce themselves. I'm Kevin Brown, I'm the chair.
I'm Tom Wells, I'm the vice chair.
Carol Klaus, member of the board.
Ted Desmond, member.
Brenda Tilburg, member.
John Moyers, member.
Is that everybody?
And we've got Josh and Rob as alternates on what sitting in as well, correct?
Josh.
Yeah, but how many non-alternate members do we have?
One.
No,
So
who are not alternates.
Oh, you've got six actual members tonight.
All right, and we're seven, right, total? So somebody's going to be an alternate, so I guess Josh and Rob. We'll do scissors, paper, rock or something for you.
Why don't you call it, Rob?
Go ahead. You can have this one and I'll take the next one.
Okay.
All right,
sounds good.
Josh is sitting as a member then.
Thank you.
All right, so any changes to the agenda? I wouldn't think so. Okay, well, excuse me, proceed to new business.
She's our bylaw.
Pardon me?
She really lied to us.
She's couldn't hear. Let's turn up the volume. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay. First order of business, permit number 16-01 PRD, amend Robert Fuller at 93 North Street, parcel number 20-51-12.1, requesting a site plan amendment to add 6 garages per the Unified Development Regulations, Article 3, Section 691. All right, and 691 is site plan review, general description. Do we have, one of the things we have to do is figure out who's participating as or tends to participate and whether or not they're interested persons. So I see some people attending here. There's Jill. Who among the members of the public is anyone in the immediate neighborhood of the project and wishes to participate? It's an open meeting, it's a public meeting, so anyone can comment, but interested persons are those who are in the immediate neighborhood, would potentially be impacted, and those are the folks who could appeal if they didn't like our decision. So I know we had a letter from Bill Bouvier.
Yeah, and Bill's actually online with you, Kevin.
Okay.
He's the
Hi,
phone
Bill.
call.
Hi,
Hey,
Bill.
Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing all
How you
right.
doing?
Good.
Good,
So
good.
your property is how close to, it's pretty close to this Fuller property, right?
65 feet away.
Okay, so you're in the immediate neighborhood.
Yes.
Bill's an interested person. I was pretty confident of that. Jill, are you just observing or?
Yeah, I'm here to observe.
Okay. Anybody else who feels they're in the immediate neighborhood? So we can make a determination on whether they're an interested person or not. Okay. All right. So, all right, we'll go ahead. One question I had, Chris, before I understand what the proposal is it's come to us as a site plan amendment, but apparently there was it seems as if there was a PUD in 2017 and we don't have that. I mean, we have minutes, but I don't know what the permit says. So I have my initial concern is, does this proposal require an actual change to the PRD or PUD permit?
Not actually to the permit. So the site
Is there-
plan,
Is there a permit?
there is, that is the 16-01 PRD. So
Yeah,
It
but
was-
is it the minutes, what we see in the minutes, or is there a separate permit?
no, it's there. There was just a decision letter. There was minutes and a decision letter. That's all that I have on that.
And does the decision letter lay out specifics about how this property is to be used as a PUD, how it's to be configured?
No,
Really?
the only thing it talks about, I'm pulling it up right now.
I think it mentions the site plan dated December 12th, 2016.
Right, but a PUD or a PRD is more than just a site plan. It's a relaxation of a lot of the zoning bylaws to allow for clustering and such.
But we don't have that. And it also mentioned additional materials Mr. Fuller provided at the meeting, and we don't know what those were either.
Right.
That
So-
was,
We don't
But-
even know if the plan presented here is the same as the December 12th one, 2016, with just the garages added.
Yeah, so is there a description in the permit, the existing permit, Chris, about how this property is to be configured?
no, but hang on.
I mean, I see in the minutes from Mr. Fuller's discussion in 2017 that there was an idea that the individual houses, they would own each house would be its own own the footprint. Is that right, Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, and so, and the rest of the land is common land?
Yeah, so what I'm selling there now, except for the one house that I built, is a building envelope that's 60 feet by 45 feet. And those are laid out in one of the previous plans that was done by Lincoln Applied Geology.
Well, is it,
Ron also did a plan, but he sort of scattered the envelopes around.
well, what I'm trying to get a handle on is what the existing approval is for how this property is configured between 6 houses or 6 building sites, and the rest of the property is common land. Is there a condominium declaration and bylaws?
Yes, there's a long little phone book of bylaws and a community declaration.
All right, was that part of the PU, is it a PRD or a PUD, Chris, from 2017?
In 2016, we had PRDs
All right,
only. So
all right,
the,
all right, so,
I want to read you to this. So I want to clear up the decision letter and I will read it to you verbatim. Somebody's got a child in the background. Either you need to mute yourself or please move the child. Thank you. The exact decision letter. Dear Mr. Robert Fuller, your zoning permit application for a 6-unit planned residential development 16-01 PRD on parcel 2051-12-1 on North Street was granted by the Bristol Planning Commission on January 10th, 2017. Please let me know if you have any questions. Sincerely, Sue Kavanaugh, Chair, Bristol Planning Commission. That is the entire decision letter I have. So
wow, that's disappointing.
Yeah,
I thought I would lay it out so you knew what I had.
Yeah, no, thanks, but
The
so,
site plan and the site plan that I sent you that was Exhibit B, it was labeled
Yeah.
B, Fuller Property.
yeah,
That is the original, that is the approved site plan with the only change between that and the site plan on file are the 6 garage squares that were added to it.
right.
So that's
based
what I
on
have
that-
on file.
Based on the letter that you just read, we'd have to we'd have to know what the application materials were in addition to the original site plan submitted to know how the heck this thing is supposed to be set up. It doesn't show, like, the site plan doesn't show us building envelopes.
Yeah, these, I'm gonna share, you want me to share a screen with you so we can look at the site plan all in one?
Please.
Let me see if I can, give me a moment.
What I have is a June 8, 2020 drawing by LaRose, Allison Parker, trustee of the Allison Parker Living Trust. Plan showing site plan lands of Allison Parker, trustee of the Allison Parker Living Trust. Yeah, I have that. That's the proposal now.
Correct, and that is the same site plan that is on file with the only difference between this site plan and the site plan that was of approval are the addition of the 6 garages here, here.
But I have a
here.
question. If that's, I see the garages, but did the original site plan, which we don't have, did it have the internal access road?
Yes,
That was all there, but there just weren't. Okay,
yes, and 3 parking spaces per house.
So
Can we see the other plan? There were 2 plans submitted, one that has these additional garages and one that doesn't.
I'm trying
Can we look at,
I'm
The
trying
other
to
one
pull
we
that
have-
up right now.
it's a survey, not a site plan, and it's just has building envelopes. Nothing else.
I'm trying to
And
see
the
if I have-
This was done by Ron LaRose.
right,
It doesn't even show the entire road.
No, it didn't. That's why I was asking whether it was previously approved with the road.
right. So what so I'm looking at, yeah. So is that is what we're looking at now the original site plan, Chris? Is that, can you tell?
This, yeah, this is the plan. I'm not gonna lie, this was one of the,
I asked a bad question. Let me rephrase. Is this is the June 8, 2020 plan that we see here, the existing approved site plan?
what we have here is the Mylar of the survey, which is the plat that is on file. The
Yeah.
site plan that is on file. So this is weird. This is one of the first times the planning commission dealt with the brand new site plan thing that they did. So it's sort of like you guys doing your first one here. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little convoluted.
Well, I'm still confused. What is the significance of the June 8, 2020 survey plat that we were just looking at? Is it the approved site plan or is there a different document that's the approved site plan?
There's a different document. It is this same document you're looking at right now,
Yeah,
minus the 6 squares that have the garages.
okay,
And where the garages sit, there were parking spaces. I'm literally trying to see if I have a digital copy of this
right,
in my
okay,
archives.
okay.
So that everybody else looks at it, there's a difference between the LaRose survey and the site plan in that these building envelopes, well, what were building envelopes, if you now have essentially first floor plans, they've been moved. They needed to be moved in order to fit the road in immediately next to the neighbor. So you'll see that they've all been moved back into the site slightly.
Right. So part of the confusion is Mr. Ravel at Lincoln Applied Geology does not survey. So a survey had to be done of the site. So you have two maps that complement each other. One is a site plan, which is this document here that you're looking at. The second is purely the survey where these boxes were estimated locations when LaRose put this together.
Okay, yeah, I can see on the site plan that the building locations are in somewhat different places.
Yeah,
Well, here's my concern. PRDs are planning tools designed to allow for comprehensive development that where you're not subject to the stricture, all the strictures that you would be on an individual lot. It all works together in a unified way, and it requires certain restrictions, setbacks, site coverage maybe, density maybe, number of lots, all those kinds of things. And so what I'm looking, I understand from the minutes and from what Mr. Fuller just told us that the individual lots are a building envelope, correct, Mr. Fuller? A 40, so you've sold one and you've deeded to the buyer a 45 by 60 building envelope?
Correct.
Okay, so where are these proposed garages in relation to the building envelopes? Are they entirely contained within them? We can't tell.
No, the garages are going to be on the common land.
So,
Well, then,
That's already been written into the declaration.
so
but they're buildings. So who's going to own them?
They're going to be the responsibility of the individual homeowners. This has all been written into the declaration by Kevin Brennan,
Okay,
that's
but-
representing us. They're not going to own the land underneath them. It's more like it's a bit of a hybrid. Kevin LaRose told me when he was first started to survey this project, he said, this is the first one I've ever worked on where the people own any of the land, like at the co-housing in the center of town, the people who bought those individual houses don't own any of the land, including the land under the house. My understanding.
that is
So
correct.
this is a hybrid.
yeah,
I'm not a professional
I-
developer, and frankly, I didn't know what I was doing. But I thought, because I had a conversation with a developer of Kirby Cottages in South Burlington, he told me that when he did that project 10 or 12 years ago, that the people that were buying them wanted to own the land under the cottage. So he made some arrangement where they owned a little building envelope. So that's where I got the idea. And then there's a driveway with parking spaces that is all common land. And
right.
Several
That's
people-
pretty typical.
yeah, well, several people have asked if they could build a garage. So we have 3 sales pending right now, waiting for this decision. I don't know if we tell them they can't build a garage, I don't know if they're going to go away or not. But there's a lot of interest, and it's something I should have thought about earlier. And I'm sorry to come and burden you with it now, but it's either, it's a building, it's another building on the site, or
Well,
potentially 6 buildings, people.
it's
don't
6
have to-
buildings.
Yeah, people don't have to build a garage. A 24 by 24 garage, covering the
Yeah.
same amount of ground as their parking space would cover, except that it also has a 3rd dimension.
Robert, are there elevations of these garages, what they look like?
No, my vision is if you go by Livingston's down on the corner of 17 and 116, right in the middle of the yard there's one of the biggest buildings in their yard is a 2-car garage. It has a shed roof off one side of it, and it has a dormer on the roof, but it's 24 by 24. It's a nice little unit, and I've suggested it to people that said they want a garage. It comes with a pressure-treated lumber floor, but at that size, it has to be put on a concrete slab to remain stable. And it costs about $50,000 or $60,000. I thought that was a pretty good deal for somebody who wants a nice, neat garage. And it's a very, cute little structure. The one they have down there has the same kind of board and batten siding. It's painted red, but it has board and batten siding like the house that we built on the north side of the barn.
Would you mandate that whatever appearance you decide on would be the same for all of them?
I don't know if that's something we can decide on. We already have this other thing here. And as long as it meets height requirements. As long as we figure it has appropriate setbacks, is not too large. And I did a little calculating, and what on earth zoning district is this in? I saw, as I said, I saw.
It's
three
HDR
different
and
zones.
mixed.
I think we do have some in a site plan approval, have to be concerned about what the building like and the landscaping and drainage and lighting and all those other issues. So you may not have done that in the past, but those are part of the criteria now.
Yeah, I think that's right. But so Chris, back to the question just asked about districts. Is it correct that this is HDR and mixed?
Yeah, there's a small piece of it in the corner was mixed.
Okay.
I'm trying to see if that was on. No, they didn't call it up out in here. When I say small, it's like, you look where my cursor is on the western, it bisects it like through here. It's not a very big piece of it.
Yeah.
So over 90% of this is HDR. All of the actual development where you see building proposal is in HDR.
Okay.
Anyway, so I calculated whether adding these garages would bring it up over a too large lot percentage. And what I get is, even with the garages, it's about 15% of the lot would be covered with buildings, with the house envelope plus the garages. So it doesn't cover too much of the lot. We have found that there are no covenants, definitions of open spaces and things like that. So all we need to do
I don't know what that
look at the
means.
garages.
I don't know. It depends on what the original proposal said about what's going to be open space because of the clustering here.
Who has that? Do we have a record of that, though?
Yeah, there's a record of what they, well, there's a record of what was submitted and we don't have it.
No. And that's our problem.
That's not our problem.
Well, it's a problem trying to decide.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have, I can't tell, and I think my personal view is I think we need to be able to tell if this proposal actually requires an amendment of the existing PRD permit approval. It may well, I expect it does, but I don't know that. I think it's more than just a site plan amendment.
Yeah,
or at least it may be. I'd certainly want to understand how Kevin Brennan, who's I know him decently well and think a lot of him. I don't have a real understanding for myself of how this project works together as a whole with respect to land ownership. And I think we need to be able to confirm that in order to figure out whether is it simply just a site plan amendment or is an amendment to the existing PRD required. I'm not comfortable. I can't say, so that I'm not comfortable.
The original plan that was approved, it discussed the 6 building envelopes and the rest would be in common land. And that is still what Mr. Fuller is proposing. The physical structures where they sit and what they aren't impacting. The reason why I felt that this needed to come to the DRB is in the site plan, under my jurisdiction or whatever authority provided, if I felt that there was a significant change to a site plan, that I should send it to you all for review of a site plan modification.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And my understanding, the way this was passed and was proposed, passed, and what the changes are, it's purely a site plan change. They're not talking about change of ownership. It's the same common land. How they write their covenant of who can go in what garage and do what, that their original covenants said it was up to their governing, to their HOA, basically,
Well,
to their
I would-
homeowners association.
Right, but they're now building outside the building envelopes, and the concept of common land usually implies that means open, that means it's open. You're not building buildings that are actually owned by someone who has a lot. That's not consistent with common land.
Well, the difference, where that does come into play sometimes, Kevin, in development is you'll see in condos where there'll be a common parking structure where no single owner owns it. It's owned by the association and you're assigned your parking space. If you want to look at it that way, I mean, that's one way that,
Well,
to noodle that through.
No, I know those are all possible. And the existing approvals might actually speak to that, or they might not.
And if you wanted to condition that this needs to be clarified in whatever method that you feel is appropriate as a board, I would then recommend either conditioning it if you wanted to. But
Well,
I will leave it there.
Well, that's fine. I'll say what my thinking is, and I'd certainly like to hear from the other board members and Mr. Fuller, of course, as well. My thought would be, I would really like to see and understand the existing approval, and that requires seeing what was submitted in as part of the application, and because that's what was approved, even though the letter is rather pithy, in order to determine whether or not we need to actually have an amendment of the existing PRD, and in conjunction therewith a site plan amendment. My thought would be, it would just make sense to continue to a date certain so we could get all that material in front of us, because I don't like trying to figure it out this way and having to, make Chris scramble to read things to us. And there's probably a fair amount of documentation there that was provided along with it. Chris is correct that in sometimes you have a common building as well. But that's not what's going on here. That's not what's proposed. So I'm not saying it's illegal or anything, but I'm saying it may be. I would like to confirm for the board to be able to confirm for itself that it fits within the existing permit or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then the existing permit needs to be amended or considered for amendment, and the site plan approval would be part of it. That's how I'm looking at it, gang. What do you guys think?
I have a couple questions,
John?
if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
One question would be whether, and I think I'm just echoing what you might have just said, but if there's a sort of discrete package of what was
Submitted?
used for the application earlier, as it appeared the day it was submitted, that would be helpful.
That's what's approved.
Yeah, I have several questions that would probably be answered by that. One is, what is the overall lot size? And
A little over 3.
Right. So since there's six residential units on here, there's a certain density per acre that's allowed in this zone. And
That's what's, and clustering, it's a high density zone.
yeah, it's a high density zone, but it does have square footage totals. And I'm presuming that because it's sort of a cluster proposal, that some of those were waived or melded around a little bit to fit the 6 with the common area that's not the common land that's not developed. There's some sort of benefit to clustering it, right?
Yeah. Hey,
Zoning
Chris,
benefit.
that's right. You relax certain restrictions in order to produce a unified whole. And
Right.
and
So one of
usually-
my questions then is, assuming that that's the case on the board back then, but, and this is a question doesn't have to be answered right now, but if these 6 garages had been on the original plan, would that have changed the board's thinking one way or another? So that's one of my questions. Would it have not affected the density or anything like that? Or would it have? It might have, I don't know.
Hey, Chris,
And
can
I
you
have a
take down the
question.
map?
Sorry.
I was asking Chris to take down the site plan that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
looking at because I can't see the board.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
And my other question is one of
Thank you.
process, which is my understanding is that we have a new set of zoning regulations now than we had when this was proposed. I don't know enough to know if we would go back and consider it under the old rules or if we're bound to consider it under the rules that exist today.
Well, they're not very different
Well,
substantively.
They actually were, because this was approved under the zoning 2 iterations ago.
Oh, okay, that's I had looked at the 2017s because that's where the minutes were from. So that's I didn't go back far enough.
Yeah, so the new zoning was approved between the application and the hearing. So the 2012 zoning regs were applied to this hearing. That's why it's a PRD, and PRDs ceased to exist as of 2017.
Okay.
So that is my question, which is under what rules are we considering this latest application?
Well, we were considering it right now as simply a site plan amendment, which was permissible in 2016 as well, although the planning commission, I think, dealt with it. The planning commission dealt with it because I never remember dealing with site plan. But any event, I hadn't thought it through a lot. I think when you go for an amendment, then you're gonna face the new regs. I don't think there's a big. I understand the difference in the nomenclature, but the concept between PUD and PRD is they're similar in what they allow and what they try to accomplish and I don't think, I'll go back and look at 2016 as well, but I don't think there were specific standards that were there in 2016 that are not there under the PUD rubric.
If I could just comment, I think you're going to find that there's very little difference between what was there and what's there now, but
That was my sense.
yeah, but generally speaking, if you're seeking an amendment at this time of either the PUD ordinance, what used to be PRD, or the site plan, you have to deal with the regulations as they are right now.
That's what I think as
So,
well.
so I think that approaches your question a little bit, John. So
I think it
you
does.
don't have a grandfathered site plan, but fortunately they're not that different. But
No, I think that's right. That's my view of it. If you move for an amendment, you're looking for, you have to comply with what's out there now. We're not frozen in time. And if you want to change what the approval is, then you got to face what the current regs are. But I agree, substantively, there's probably not a heck of a lot of difference, if
So
any.
if we assume for just a moment that there's no substantive difference between the rules that existed then and now for the purposes of this application, then I just wonder if, back to my first question, which is, if there were 3,500 square feet more land coverage, which is about what these total up to, 3,400 square feet and change, would that affect the density calculation or anything like that?
Yeah, well, it can be waived. That criteria is waivable.
minutes ago, she said and I haven't done the calculations, did the calculations. It does appear, just from visually looking at it, that this is a relatively small development, both as to the principal residences and the garages, so that it's probably not over coverage problem.
Yeah, I don't think so either, not in the high density zone.
Well,
minimum
let's-
lot size is
let's call.
10,000 square feet.
So,
Brenda, you
so-
had your hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brenda, can you
I was
speak,
just
please?
going to say, when I calculated it, I got 15% coverage and the village mixed is 20% maximum coverage allowed and the HDR is even higher. So I don't think we need to worry about coverage. There's other things we need to worry about, but not that.
so,
Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
and I'd
Agreed.
just like a point of clarity.
Yep.
So you're using the correct terminology. Lot coverage is what would be impacted here. In Bristol, per our zoning regs, when we talk about density, it's purely housing units per acre.
Oh,
So when you say, oh, is it dense enough? It's just how many housing units per acre can the land handle? So the garage is actually, when we talk density, would not be calculated. Lot coverage, they would be. Sorry to nitpick, but I just want to get the right,
No,
that you
that's,
guys are using the right terms.
that's a good point, but the lot coverage is 50% in the HDR, so we're well under that piece of the current bylaws. But the whole point of PUDs, or formerly PRDs, was to be able to relax where appropriate those individual criteria. But
we don't need to.
Chris, can I ask a question?
sure
Absolutely.
can.
So does the original permit, does that contain the garages? Yes or no?
No.
And we are now considering garages. So we're doing a site plan approval regardless tonight, correct? And I think there's a good discussion as to whether or not what was the original permit and whether or not there should be an amendment that should be considered. So I think, to be very pointed, do we think we should be calling for an amendment of the initial submission?
That's my, well, I think we ought to do, Josh, is to continue this hearing, have those documents supplied to us so we can review them in advance of the hearing, and then come back and look at it. And, you know, if it was a, well, there's a warning question too. You warned it as a site plan amendment, Chris?
Because that's how yes, because that's what I felt that needed to be adjusted here, not the
Yeah,
actual.
I understand.
Can we condition our review on that amendment and the shoring up of those documents to show continuity from the original submission to our review today?
I would
Yeah.
not,
You have to see him first, I'm afraid.
yeah.
Okay, so
The other thing
that
I wanna
that
see,
immediately derails the process, so we can't
Yeah.
even review it tonight.
very aware of Mr. Fuller's pointing out to us that he's sort of in the middle of this and has lots sold. So trying to help him move along. It appears to me, at least, and I know, Chris, you were there, that it was a fairly relaxed review in terms of the site plan here. So that, I mean, I at least have some questions in terms of, this is not just a driveway. This is a road for 6 houses. So it's a fairly substantial internal road. You know, is somebody figured out to make sure this property is going to drain properly? Is there going to be any internal site lighting on any of this? And has somebody figured out how garbage is going to be handled, and all the kinds of site plan things is going to be all of these garages that are now proposed are basically along North Street. So there's some aesthetic things. And to me, the material that we have right now in terms of a site plan's kind of incomplete, or at least we need a lot more testimony to understand what it is we're approving here. So, I mean, if we're going to delay it at all, my inclination would be to, unless none of the rest of the board is concerned about this, we are sort of taking over something that the planning board did in 2017. I think we should get a little bit more information in terms of what it is that the applicant is asking for and that we need to approve.
Kurt,
I agree.
I agree.
anybody?
I have additional concerns. So you have shared ownership on this property. In my experience, type 5 construction typically has a distance requirement between structures. There's a couple of these garages that are closing in on less than 10, 15, 20 feet separation, which concerns me. Residential is one of the highest risk type of constructions there is. So I would be interested to hear what the fire marshal had to say with that. I don't know if it's the purview of this board to dictate that though.
It is, and Josh, if you look at the, what that was some of the concerns with some of the fire safety aspects of the site, and I believe Brett is online or was going to be. I reached out to him when I got your note to see if the fire chief, Brett LaRose, had any further input on this.
Yeah.
And I thought he was online here with us, but
Originally, in the hearings before the planning commission, Brett's comments and concerns were with respect to the adequacy of the common driveway and the steepness of part of the driveway with respect to fire trucks and turnaround and that sort of thing.
correct.
So that was my first concern, and my second concern was fire access truck access to the houses. Now that we're locating the garages in front of the houses in respect to the road, and access for the fire department. So that and hydrant locations. This is all things I'd like to see if possible. Go ahead, Robert.
So I've spoken to Brett about this subject. I called him in before the initial planning commission meeting and showed him the plan. And the driveway that goes off of North Street and turns left and goes south originally had a pretty steep incline, and he was concerned about that. And when we built the septic system, we had to scrape off quite a bit of overburden. That's what Chris Acker likes to call it. And he originally was just going to pile it down in the ancient drainage there. And I said, no, I want you to push that up into that corner. So I paid him some extra money to push all that dirt up in there. So the driveway that's going to go in there now is not going to have nearly as much of an angle on it. And before we put those houses in, there's a lot of fill that's going to come out of the houses on the north side of the property that's going to have to go somewhere. And I've already instructed Chris Acker, anything that's left over up there goes in the southeast corner of this lot to build up that low area. So that just for that reason. So it'll be
Southeast
easier for the
corner?
tenants to get in and out of there in the wintertime, and it'll be easier to get fire trucks in and out of there. And Brent LaRose was very thankful to me that I called him into that meeting and he made a point with the planning commission. He said, I'd like to get more of these calls because I've never been called in the past when people are considering this kind of stuff. So I've tried to involve as many people as possible. You know, the whole concept here is to do a little infill. You know, this is a 3-acre site that used to have one house on it. And I've got it approved now for 6 houses. And I've had a lot of people ask me about garages. They already have a parking space, 24 by 24 or larger. So now they just want permission to put a building on it. It all seemed pretty simple to me. I understand from listening to this conversation that when you try to stick to the regs and make sure you have all the information you need to make an informed decision, that it gets more complicated than that. But the bottom line is, you know, the whole reason I'm doing this is because I want to move. You know, we live in Lincoln now, but I'm thinking I want, you know, when I get to be older, I want to be in the village. I want to be closer to the doctor's office and the drugstore and the supermarket and opportunities for socialization. And we're pretty well situated here in downtown Lincoln. We're almost a stone's throw from the general store, unlike a lot of people that live out in the hinterland. And it's quite common when people get old that they get lonely because their friends go away, their mate has died, whatever. And virtually everyone I've talked to that's interested in putting up a house on this property has said exactly the same thing. The house that's going up now is owned by a woman, Deb, forgetting her last name right now. She lived in Starksboro for 30 years. She and her husband moved to Florida. They've been there for 6 years. They want to come back to Vermont and they want to live in the village. In Starksboro, they lived out in the countryside. Now they want to live where there's more opportunity. Socialization is the third leg of the stool for successful aging. If you're lucky enough to keep your physical self and your mental self together, you need socialization. And this is a mistake that some people make when they fall in love with their house that's in the middle of nowhere. You know, I built a house when I first came to Vermont in the 70s on 25 acres of land in New Haven. I wouldn't want to live there now. I loved
Hey,
it.
Robert,
Yeah.
Robert, can I
so-
add something can
Go
I
ahead.
add something for you? So I can tell you what you're doing here in Bristol is very common. And as you're alluding, it is the way that a lot of communities are looking to develop and why we're considering this type of development. I think there's some challenges and the board really wants to do it the right way and make sure that you have a firm ground to start from and ensure that continuity. So when I made those comments about the garages, I don't think that's necessarily an insurmountable challenge. I think you're close, but I think some additional coordination, you could shoehorn those into that site. No problem.
Yeah, what I'm concerned about, Robert, is inadvertently creating a disconnect, a conflict between the site plan, the approved amended site plan, and the underlying PRD permit. And I'd rather get that right on the front end, and those, we handle those things together. So it's not two separate proceedings, but I think the safe course and wisest course is to consider it actually an amendment to the PRD as well, because these buildings are going on otherwise known as common land and would actually the buildings themselves would be owned by the unit owners. I'll bet dollars to donuts that the existing PRD approval does not address that concept. It's not illegal or inappropriate or anything. I think there's just a gap there. It wasn't thought of, and we need to close the circle on it.
Well, it's been covered in the document that, the declaration and the bylaws. For
Yeah, but is that since the PRD approval or before the PRD approval?
It wasn't part of the PRD approval.
That's my point.
So, and I have a related question, if I could jump in, which is, is there an HOA or similar type governing structure here, condo association or something that's already created?
There'll be a steering committee. Just like I knew some people that lived at 10 Stones in Shelburne, and there's I don't know how many homes are there, but they had a steering committee.
But they'll have won't they, Robert? They'll have an overall document, the bylaws. If you, John is right, it's called a homeowners association document, something like that.
Right.
Something like that, condo agreement or whatever.
Well, there's
The reason I ask is because it seems like who is applying for this amendment is the question that I have. Is it coming from the HOA? Is it coming from one owner?
There is no HOA because right now we're the only owners.
I thought you already sold a lot.
Well, yeah, but we haven't formed a committee.
Okay. Well,
we
but
sold
there's
one
two.
lot. There's a house being built. There's three
Right, so
other
there's
lots
two-
under contract.
Right, there's two. Well, that's right. So there's whether it's called whatever kind of association, it's a common interest community under the law, and those operate through two documents. One's called the declaration, and Robert's telling us that's been prepared. That's something that gets filed in the land records, and that's kind of like the Constitution for the development. And then there's this set of bylaws. That declaration authorizes the bylaws, but then there's bylaws which are kind of like statutes in relation to constitutions. That's the particulars about process and assessments and all kinds of things. So it's those two documents
Federalist Papers.
together are the governing documents for what's called a common interest community. I live in Broadview, so that we're a PRD. We have a homeowners association and a set of bylaws and a declaration. Other places that are true condominiums, they have a condominium association. The name doesn't matter. They're all subject to what's called the Common Interest Ownership Act, and which Vermont has adopted, like all 50 states.
So just to,
We're getting a look at it right here. Robert's showing it.
Go ahead, Chris.
so the Fire Chief Brett LaRose is on the line, had some comments. He's on mute, he's on his phone, and just needed to know when he could hop on. If you felt this was appropriate, it would be.
All right, we'll hear from Brett.
Good evening, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Yes, good evening, and Mr. Fuller, hello. I do recall visiting with Mr. Fuller back in January of 2017. I was actually reviewing the email, our correspondence from that date, and reviewing the site plan, both at that time and the one that was just presented to me in the last couple of days. And per my discussions with Mr. Fuller, as he already noted, we did come to, I don't want to say an agreement, just agreed that the changes he was making at the time, addressing the 15% grade on the southerly drive, and as far as emergency vehicle turnaround on the north drive, which was my main concern, that was being addressed by the additional 2 or 3 parking places per structure. And what I see on the new site plan is with the garage being added, it appears you are losing a couple of those parking places for obvious reasons. People would park in a garage. However, the large red trucks wouldn't fit in someone's garage to turn around. And that's just, it's a concern. That's a pretty good drive back there, and backing those vehicles that great distance, when those vehicles are in reverse mode, they require a spotter, and it's just very dangerous to back up a fire truck. And so that's just something I'm wondering if it was being taken into consideration with the addition of the garages to the site plan. Thank you.
Well, Brett, Tom Wells, I think what we really need from you is advice is basically as presently drawn up here, will it work? I mean, do you feel that you can safely get fire equipment to each of the residences and the garages? Because if it won't, really, we have to ask the applicant to see if he can do it a different way. At least that's.
So there's two answers to that question, Tom. The first is yes, we can absolutely provide fire protection to all of these structures, providing the roadway is kept clear, snow removed, sanded, the whole 9 yards. However, it's the safety concern at the conclusion of a response. And we're not talking just about a fire. I mean, we're talking about any emergency. If we should respond to a residence for just a smoke detector activation. And again, I'm not seeing the dimensions on the drawing I have, and perhaps they're there, but if someone could just maybe educate me, and certainly you don't need to take your time, Chris probably could help me out perhaps tomorrow. I don't know what the dimensions of those driveways are, and could an emergency vehicle, a 35-foot vehicle, turn around?
Well, it's not unreasonable for us to even ask the applicant's engineer to apply a turning template essentially, and make sure that a 35-foot vehicle can, maneuver in these spaces. So you're not making your fair. We want to come up with something that's safe for everybody and the fire department.
Well, certainly, and I understand. It's you guys got a job to do, and Mr. Fuller has a development he wants to build, and that is what we came up with in January 17. It was the addition of the additional parking places per unit was the resolution to that turnaround. Opposed to like having a cul-de-sac at the end of that drive. Because I don't even know if there's real estate there to do that. So that's all. I just need to understand what the dimensions of the existing driveways that are remaining, should the garages be built, could they accommodate the turnaround of a 35-foot long vehicle?
That's not an uncommon request, Brett, for fire departments to have of developments like that, like this.
I think it should be necessary.
Well, again, this is a conversation, not for tonight, but certainly I appreciate in recent years, I know I'm not getting all these right, but whether it's the planning commission or the zoning, whomever has at least brought the fire chief to the table to ask these questions. I don't know. I don't think Bristol has any rules around this stuff, but just being included in the conversation is very much appreciated.
We
Okay,
understand.
so just scaling off the drawing, just out of curiosity, the garages, the way they're drawn, are 24 by 24. And that's about how wide the driveway is drawn on the site plan. So it's about 24 feet. It's over 20 for
So,
sure.
so if the garage is 24 by 24, I guess my assumption is the parking place next to it is approximately 12 foot in width.
Well, could be. I don't know. Typical parking space for one car standard is 18 by 9.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. This is a fairly small scale plan we're looking at, so it's kind of tough to tell.
But if you just
Yeah.
look at the garages that are, scaled out at 24 by 24, and you look at the width of the garage and you look at the width of the driveway, it's pretty close to the same.
Yeah, that is helpful, Robert, that when you told us that 24 by 24, that everything was bigger than I thought it was.
And it's certainly, it's realistic to think that, a vehicle could be a fire truck could be turned around in that space. And obviously, perhaps it's occupied with another car and we would have to address that at that moment in time. This is just stuff you can't plan for. But just having the real estate to be able to turn around a vehicle and, a 9 foot wide parking spot, for a competent driver it's certainly adequate space to back an emergency vehicle into. And I'm sorry, what was the overall width of the driveway?
It looks to me like it's close to 24 feet. It's somewhere between 20 and 24.
Hey, Brett, you got that big truck and it's an emergency, you just slam them right out of the way, right?
I wish it was that easy, but we're very sensitive to driving on people's lawns and such. It's the aftermath of trying to keep up the PR piece.
I wonder
Well-
what the car would look like if you rode over the top.
If the garages are built, the parking spots disappear, don't they?
Yes.
Some
All
of
right,
them,
so then you're hoping you can back up a fire truck in winter alongside of a garage. When maybe there's snowbanks from plowing, I would expect there would be.
So this is Brett. I just have a clarification question. So I just heard the statement that if the garage is built, the parking places go away. However, just the drawing I'm looking at, it's my understanding that the space next to the garage, at least I'm looking at the one at the very north end of the north drive, or excuse me, the westerly end of the north drive, looks like a parking space to the east of
Yeah.
the garage.
I
Is that
see-
correct?
I see that, Brett.
Yep. A lot of,
Okay.
some of them go away, but not all of them.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I don't think it's not realistic to think there's going to be an emergency vehicle turnaround at each one of these locations. It's just, primarily at the end, we can always drive forward if we have a place to turn around safely, and then, then we can exit the driveway. So having one at every residence is certainly not necessary. But having just even one at the very end of that drive is, kind of essential, I think. And if that space next to that garage could accommodate an emergency vehicle, which it could, and like I said, if it's clear, that certainly would meet the need. And there's never an ideal situation. We're just trying to think long term and just how we can do our job as safely as possible.
Well, sure. Anything else for Chief LaRose?
No, sir. That's really the comment I had this evening was just
Yep.
about the garages and would we be able to turn around an emergency vehicle? And I think I've answered my own question. If Mr. Fuller is committed to creating a space that's wide enough to turn around a vehicle at the end of that roadway, that certainly would meet our needs.
So,
Yes.
any
Brett,
other questions from the board for the
Yeah.
chief?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just what would be the minimum space, that you would need to turn your largest vehicle around?
Well, would you say that the parking place is 9 by 18? Is that what you said?
That would be the minimum.
The minimum. Okay. Well, that 9 by 18, I'm not going to get into the science of it because I don't know and I'd just be guessing. But if that's 9 by 18 and you have an approximate I'm sorry, was it 12 or 18-foot wide driveway?
20 or 24, somewhere between 20 and 24.
That's more than adequate space to turn around the vehicle.
Okay.
Good.
All right, any other questions or comments from the board before we take public comment or questions? Okay, Bill Bowie, are you still there?
I am, yep.
You want, anything you want to say? Any questions you want to ask?
Well, I'm just listening to Brett, and the driveway that ends pretty much at the last house, the one that's under construction right now, guesstimating, you know, as the crow flies, building's probably 20 to 25 feet off from the boundary line. So I don't know how you would have a turnaround there. You know what I'm saying, as far as being able to jockey the fire truck, rescue squad, so on and so forth around. But again, I'm not a truck driver. Okay. I guess my concern is the density of it. We're looking at what, 3.5 acres originally, and a fair amount of that footprint was taken up with the septic system. And you're looking at what he said, 45 by 60 footprint for each building lot. If I and I hope I'm getting the figures right here. I hope I am.
You're close.
And then you're taking another 24 by 24 out of that. It's going to be like really super snug in there. And I'm looking at it as a safety factor, number one. Number two, the runoff water that I had brought up at the original proposed meeting for this was never addressed. It was never followed through on. And I'm concerned with that.
What do you mean, Bill? You mean it wasn't part of the original proposal?
It was brought up and never was really clarified.
Okay.
I've heard a couple things in the wind. Okay, I was told that it was going to be culverted all the way to the top of the bank out here where this house that is under construction is now. It was going to be there. Also, too, originally, if I'm not mistaken, the proposal was for 6 cottage-size dwellings. Well, certainly this building up back behind me now is the size of 2 townhouses. That thing's enormous. And they were going to have attached carports. And things have blossomed and stemmed into more and more, which I got it. I understand how that goes. You know, people's minds change, so on and so forth. But 6 buildings on this small piece of property is excessive, right from the get-go. Plain and simple. It's way too much. And to add another 6, in my book, is pretty much out of the question. I mean, especially with the original proposal with carports. Okay. The density of this area over here, you won't have to worry about mowing any lawns. Let's put it that way. There ain't gonna be any lawn over here. It's gonna be roadway and houses and garages. That's how I see it. And it doesn't fit the envelope of this neighborhood, number one. It's going to be way too dense with all those buildings in there. Also, two, as far as upkeep to the roadway and whatnot, which is very close, but I'm sure within the limit of the boundary. Not quite sure how that is going to be when it's time for, again, runoff water, snow plowing, the debris from the snow plowing, who's going to be responsible for cleaning all this up, so on and so forth. The biggest concern with me is overkill on the buildings. That's way too many for that size lot out there. Way too many.
So, Mr. Fuller, Bill brought up something I hadn't heard about before. Going back to the original proposal, what was the original concept? 2-bedroom house with a carport attached?
No,
Okay.
no, it's a 2-bedroom house, and the number of bedrooms is limited by the capacity of the septic system.
Okay.
The septic system is designed for 6 2-bedroom homes. And it's 150% of capacity, according to Steve Ravel. with 150% of capacity, you do not need to identify a secondary spot to put in another leach field in 20 years.
Okay,
So that's the limiting factor on the number of houses. Originally, I had intended, my original drawings were more like the houses that are at co-housing in the center of town, story and a half, 1 bedroom up, 1 bedroom down. And I got talking with some other builders and they said, well, you know, people that are getting older, they want to live on 1 floor. They don't want to have to go up and down stairs. So then because it's a sloping site, the house that we built, we put in a full cellar, walkout cellar below, thinking that people like my wife and myself have a lot of stuff. And if we go from a 3,000 square foot house to a 1,200 square foot house, we're going to need somewhere to put all the stuff that we're not ready to get rid of yet, plus our bicycles and our kayaks and that sort of thing. So that's how the design that's there evolved. And so the only restriction is that it can only be a 2-bedroom house. And then there are some design restrictions like siding material, roofing material, roof pitch, and things like that in the deed that goes with these building envelopes, so that we don't get any low pitched, double wides. As I said earlier, we're taking a 3-acre site that used to have 1 house on it and putting 6 houses on it. The co-housing in the center of town, which I understand is a different location, already a lot more houses around, used to have 6 living units and now it has 14 living units. And, I think it's a great addition to the town myself. I think they did a great job and I think we're lucky to have them.
yeah, go ahead.
So I'm just trying to follow along in the same basic idea. And I wouldn't be asking for these garages, except that virtually everyone who's wanted to buy the house that's already built there has asked if they can build a garage.
So,
Robert, did you ever do a stormwater on this property?
Did I what?
Ever do a stormwater permit?
No, I've talked to Steve Ravel about that, and he said, well, you put these garages in, you might have to be concerned about a stormwater permit. And Tyler, I forgot his last name, who was doing all these drawings, came back to me a couple of days later after he did the calculations. And I forget what we're allowed, but we're less than half an acre. And where I think we're allowed an acre, he said, you're not even close to triggering a stormwater permit.
That's of impermeable surface.
What?
Impermeable surface.
right.
So that includes
this is
all your
Lincoln
roadways and all
Applied-
that business.
This is
Go
from
ahead.
Lincoln Applied Geology. These guys are supposed to know about this stuff. I don't know about it.
Yeah.
All right.
That's what they said, and as far as, what Bill said about the wastewater, you see in the drawing, there's a culvert under North Street that comes from the east side to the west side and
Yep.
feeds into a low area there. And it goes off, basically any water that comes through there runs off into the right of way that goes to the Beam property behind Bill's property. There's a 50-foot right of way there that goes back to that cornfield, that 10-acre cornfield that's back to the west, which you don't see in the drawing. But off the north side of the boundary there, there's that right of way, and that's where that water that comes out of that drain pipe, that's where it goes. And it's pretty flat in there, so it hasn't created any erosion problems. It just sort of trickles along, and eventually, because the land on the south side of that right of way is higher, naturally higher than the right of way. So that land, that water that goes under the road there and trickles onto the corner of our 3-acre lot does not go onto our lot from there. It goes off the lot from there. And as far as I can tell, it's never created any erosion problems or wastewater problems. I mean, the whole lot, the whole 3 acres, right down the middle of it from the southeast corner to the northwest corner, if you look at the contour lines, is what Steve Ravel called an ancient drainage. Back when Lake Vermont existed, and the shoreline was where Bristol is now, which is why Bristol's on this 100 feet of gravel, because all that gravel washed down out of the mountains and hit that calm water. And that's why we have a nice flat town. But a half mile north of the traffic light, things, the soils aren't as heavy. We had more of what they call sandy loam, and we had to dig down about 8 or 9 feet to find the sand that we needed to put in the septic system we had. And that's why we had to scrape off a lot of the overburden and get it out of the way. I don't want to get into the technical, but once you put in a leach field like that, you can't put more than a foot of dirt back over the top of it. And there was about 6 feet of dirt that had to be taken out of there. And then 1 foot
Okay.
put back.
Any other comments or questions, Bill Bouvier?
No, I don't believe so. I just, just kind of wanted to air my views on it. That was all.
Yep.
I'm not trying to be a thorn in anybody's side.
Yep.
But my biggest concern is the aesthetic of it all. I don't know what's behind everybody's garages, but I know what's behind mine. That's where all the stuff that you don't want to look at goes. And as it stands right now, the people that are building out back are going to be looking at my junk, and I'm going to be looking at everybody else's, and everybody's hiding spots are going to disappear now. I don't, looking at the layout of it, I can't calculate it, I don't scale it, but looking where the back of the garages are, where they are proposed to be, is not far from the driveway, which obviously that's where it would be, of course. But there's not a lot of wiggle room at all right there. And what started out as 6 buildings and now is going to be 12 buildings. It's awful hard for me to swallow.
I hear you.
And I think everybody
Yep.
who's familiar with this piece of property out here knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's going to be way too congested, way too congested.
So,
It's going to look like North Avenue in Burlington.
Mr. Fuller, is the house that's being built, is that the one shown in the northwest corner of the property?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you give us an estimate on the square footage of the house just for relative purposes? Well, let's say the
The length of it,
say the
it's
footprint.
almost 40 feet long, and I would say it's somewhere around, I didn't measure the width of it, but it may be 25 feet wide.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd guesstimate it 24 by 40. That's what I would have guessed it at. Yeah.
Is it 1 story or 2 stories?
2.5, it looks like, including the basement.
Okay.
No, it's 1 story. 1 story and a walkout cellar.
Okay.
They were decking the ceiling joists before they put the rafters up, and they've studded it up, so it looks like it's going to be living area up there.
No, it's a cathedral ceiling.
Throughout the whole building or just part of it?
I haven't seen the design of the house. I've just been told, because my stepson is building the house, that to increase
Okay.
the volume of the living space, they decided to put a cathedral ceiling. So that a
'Cause it looks like
a small space would feel bigger.
Okay. Any other,
Okay, understood. No,
anything else?
no, not for
Any-
me. No, not for me.
Any other comments from, or questions from John? Do you have your hand up? You're muted. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify as we go forward, next time we talk about this, about who's applying. Is there a homeowners association applying, or it's on common land, or the homeowners individually, or Robert as the living trust, as the Allison Parker Living
Well,
Trust?
Right now, since one building envelope or lot is sold and Mr. Fuller owns the remainder still, this is what's called in common interest community law, we're in the period of declarant control. So he's the owner of 5 building lots plus in a owner in common with the owner of the one lot that's been sold. So usually in a condominium or a common interest community, the common land is owned by the association, and the individual spaces are owned by unit owners. So it would be the association, if we're talking about, we're dealing with common land, at least as it's been currently described, although it's kind of quirky a little bit because, and I don't understand fully yet how it will work under the existing documents, but from what Mr. Fuller's been telling us, that the individual unit owners will own the garage buildings themselves, but not the land upon which they sit. So,
Kevin, isn't it the case that, depending on how Kevin Brennan drafted it, but typically until a certain number of the lots are sold, that the original developer or declarant would stay in control?
yeah, it's the period of declarant control, and they still have the majority of the votes, but they're
Right.
not the only.
Right.
They're
So-
in control. The declarant is in control of the association.
I think, but John, for your purposes, Robert is the appropriate applicant here.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, he is the appropriate applicant.
I agree. Well, the association.
Right. Which is controlled by him.
Right. So, any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a technical type question. So we have this lot that goes way down there and we've got these various buildings on it. What do we call along North Street? That's our front yard. So we would look at front yard setbacks there. Are the rest of those side yards, or is the farther one a backyard? How do we measure? How do we check that the setbacks are okay?
Right. Well, those are criteria that necessarily or typically get altered when you're dealing with a planned unit development or a PRD. Those are the kinds of standards that get relaxed or waived when the overall design is approved. That's in order to enable clustering.
But I don't know if I'm looking at it and I can't tell if it is a standard setback, because most of it's high density residential, which only has a 15-foot side yard setback. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah, I don't know, and I haven't scaled it off, but I understand your question.
okay.
My understanding is that one of the zoning changes in recent years, the setback, especially from the northern boundary, was decreased from 50 feet to, I don't know, you can tell me, Chris, what is this? What is the setback requirement there?
Well, in the dimensional standards in the high density residential district are
10 foot for an accessory and 15 for a principal.
Yeah,
correct, for side and rear.
right. And that was reduced. It used to be more than that, but that was reduced in the last few years.
It could have been, I don't remember.
Anyway,
And-
none of these buildings are encroaching on those standards.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
My question is, how do we decide what we're dealing with? Are we
Well,
dealing?
I was gonna make a motion once the question,
Okay, great.
once the questions were done.
Okay,
Consistent with what I have more than foreshadowed is my motion is to continue this to a date certain in the future in order for us to have the original planned residential development permit in front of us so that we can consider if indeed an amendment to the existing PRD needs to be undertaken in conjunction with an amended site plan. And I think that should be to avoid any subsequent challenges for Mr. Fuller. I think, Chris, the motion would be to warn that sufficiently in advance, or set that date out sufficiently in advance so that Chris can warn it as an amendment to the PRD as well. There have been more than a few Vermont cases where well-meaning boards had figured out in the context of a hearing that, you know what, it's not an apple, it's an orange. Well, if it wasn't warned as an orange, that's a due process problem. So I'd want to insulate Mr. Fuller from any technical attacks after the fact by warning a site plan amendment and then actually amending a PRD. I don't feel that's my motion. Wait, if someone seconds it, we'll keep talking. If not, then somebody else can make a different motion.
Kevin, can you tell me what the difference is between the two things, making a site plan amendment and amending the PRD or whatever?
Well, the site plan,
What is the difference what is the difference between the two things that you are proposing?
the site plan amendment just is a map where things are going to be.
Oh, okay.
And the existing approval which we don't have in front of us, and we can't really tell what the particulars were for that existing approval. But what it sounds like to me is that it's been pretty clear from Mr. Fuller's candid testimony that these garages weren't considered originally, and the original approval, the application materials submitted, were just for the individual units, and the rest was common land. And now we're doing something or considering something that is different from that. It's not illegal or inappropriate, but it's different from the original existing approval for the PRD. And so I think we need to have them both in front of us so that they dovetail.
Kevin, can both of those motions be considered in the same future hearing concurrently?
That's what I'm saying, Josh, is that the hearing should be warned as an amendment to the PRD and a site plan amendment. And then where we and Mr. Fuller are completely covered, we satisfied any due process concern from any interested members of the public that, gosh, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know they were going to amend the PRD. It was just a site plan amendment, but that's what we thought.
I'm on board with that. I will second that motion with that additional explanation.
So
Any further comment, Chris?
I just want to get the verbiage on your motion clear. So I have it as continue to a date certain as both an amendment to both the PRD and the site plan. Is that a fair summary of your motion?
Well, and it needs to be, because it has not been warned as an amended PRD, you got to warn it for both.
Warned as both.
So you have to build in whatever time limit.
Yep.
And we want to continue to a date certain. So can you look at what
Yep.
give us a date?
It would be
With enough time for you to get the warning out in the Addy Indy.
Yeah, I can get that out without a problem. It would be the second Tuesday would be the soonest we could do it of April, which would be the 13th.
Okay. So that's the motion, seconded by Josh. Is there any questions or debate about the motion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
It's not really germane to the motion, but I think I should mention it at this point, just so you know, get your opinion on it. One of the potential buyers came to me with a plan, a construction plan that has a house with an integrated garage. So it's all one structure and it fits within the 60 by 45 building envelope. So one of my questions would be, and I've asked Chris about this, and he said he didn't know. How is the DRB going to feel about somebody building a house that has an integrated garage as part of the structure? And you see a lot of them around. If you look,
I guess if it's something that's contemplated in the PRD permit, just fine.
I mean, it's
And
not
if it requires an amended site plan, that's part that too. But if the site plan is just dealing with a building envelope, rather than simply a house, that's a bit different. So
It's not a separate structure, it's an integrated structure.
Yeah, no, and so it's within the building envelope, but it would be different from the amended site plan proposal before us because there wouldn't be a garage.
I understand.
Yeah,
But I
so,
I think it's
wanna make sure
basically
that-
fine if you can do it and it works well, that's not a problem.
It
I
sounds
just, it has come up, and I want to make sure that, if somebody presents that to me, I can tell them, yeah, all you have to do is go and get a building permit.
Yeah.
And you-
yeah, well, I guess the
Maybe-
first question would be, you talk to Kevin Brennan and say, does this fly under the declaration and existing bylaws, or do we need to tweak them?
Yeah, and from zoning, I wouldn't view that as a substantive change to the site plan, because they're staying within their footprint. That's my,
I think that's
Um,
basically
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think that's correct. My comment was more directed to the existing approval, but if it's in the building envelope, fine. If it's outside the building envelope, then you got a different story.
absolutely.
Want to
I
make
agree.
sure. I just wanted to make sure that was the answer that I wanted, and thank you.
Okay, so we're back to the motion. Any other debate or comments about the motion? Seconded by Josh.
I'm ready to vote.
Seeing none, let's proceed to vote. All those in favor, raise your hand, please, so we can see. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then Brenda 6 and Tom 7. So 7-0. Motion carries unanimously. So Chris, remind us you need to reflect that date certain in the minutes.
Yep.
And get the warning out for both, and then we'll be good to go. In the meantime, if you could, I don't know how big the submissions are, but the board's going to need to have that packet of what the existing application was in advance of the meeting. I don't know how voluminous it is, but maybe it needs to be mailed, or maybe it needs to be, maybe email is going to work. I don't know.
I'll contact Steve as well and get these. Ravel did the original site plan on this. So I can get the original map that is on file in digital format. If it would help, I can print these out on 11 by 17.
I think that would be a big help. I tried to do that, but I don't know how to do that on our copier.
So that way I'll send out physical copies a week prior, at least a week prior. If Steve can give me the maps so that you have everything physically in hand.
Mr. Fuller, could you make sure that we get the declarations in the bylaws, since those have occurred subsequent to the existing PRD and are now the rules under which this property is going to operate?
Do you have time to read War and Peace?
I'm well familiar with these types of documents, unfortunately.
Can I also, Mr. Chairman,
Can we
suggest,
email them?
Yes, if you send them to Chris, Chris will get them to us. Yes, Tom?
I was just going to suggest to Robert, as I mentioned earlier, so that we don't end up continuing them again. For example, he gave testimony this evening indirectly about the drainage, and I feel much better about it now. But I at least am going to want to hear about, drainage, if there's any landscaping plans here, if you intend to do internal lighting of any kind, street lighting. I also be curious to how you're going to handle garbage, whether there's going to be a common dumpster, if that's be provided for, or you're going to have separate all those things I think are relevant to site plan. And I want Robert to know that if he doesn't know those things, he should know those things when he comes in, and or put them on a plan so
Good
that
point.
we don't send them away again.
So in that, that was a question I had for either the chair or whoever. So if he is going to be amending the PUD, do you would want him to go through all the PUD criteria as well as all the site plan criteria and meet all of those requirements in the current rules? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, I think that's what we would do, because that's what we're warning. But I guess the initial inquiry will be, once we have the existing documents, does he in fact need an amendment to the PRD? I think it's pretty clear that he will, but I guess that's an initial determination. Hard telling, not knowing.
Okay.
Who do I apply to get an amendment to the PRD?
Us, the same, this group.
And how do
Yeah, I
how do I know I need one?
We're going to take that up at the meeting, and we'll either determine, yes, it's needed and it'd be in conjunction with the proposal you're making, we'll consider that. Or if we said, boy, you know what, once we look at the documents, the existing documents take care of that, then you don't need one. I think the odds are pretty good that you do.
So we're back to my question is, should Mr. Fuller plan on presenting both cases regardless? And if it's unneeded, you would just disregard the information provided as far as the PUD. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think the odds that it's unneeded are extremely slim, given everything I've heard tonight.
Okay. So
they're non-existent, Robert. You're definitely going to need a change. It's almost inconceivable that it won't need to be revised.
Yeah, no, we need to understand how it's going to work, Mr. Fuller, with if the existing declarations and bylaws don't address this garage concept. We're going to need to know how they're going to be addressed. And so if once you talk to Kevin Brennan, if there are amendments that are needed, you can tell us what the proposed amendments are going to be for the documents and for the governing documents, but they need to address the property use concept that you've got in mind.
And it just as an observation, this is for Kevin and you to discuss, but the idea that you have the land underneath the homes owned by the individuals and the land underneath the garages owned by the association would strike me as irregular. And I think you should at least discuss with him doing the same thing under both.
We have discussed it, and I don't know why we came to the decision we did. But.
Well, I can tell you, at least this board member will be happy to vote for that change, because I think that's awkward for you legally, and maybe even a little problematic in terms of the PUD as well. It's a little awkward.
In any event, we will want to make sure that the property regime that you are imposing on this property through the declaration of bylaws is consistent with, or is brought consistent with, what your proposal here is going to be with respect to these garage buildings. I'm not coming down one way or another on how it ought to be, but it needs to be consistent.
Okay, so my fallback position is I could just tell all the prospective buyers, no, you can't build a garage.
You could always do that.
And then it's back to the original site plan, and it's like this was a non-meeting almost.
Yep.
Well, I just don't, I'm sorry if I'm wasting your time, but
no,
I don't recall the original planning commission meeting having that many details.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there were.
It doesn't.
Just to answer one of your questions, Tom, about lighting, if you look on the site plan, there are 4 light posts with a light. And I went by the co-housing a couple of days ago, and I noticed they have some solar lights that light some areas of their parking lot. And I thought, so you just have a 4x4 post or 6x6 post stuck in the ground and a couple of solar lights stuck on it. I'm sure there's plenty of attractive things that I could buy, but there's 2 on the southern end of the driveway and 2 on the northern end of the driveway.
I apologize if they're here. It might be my aging eyes in the small plan, but I didn't see them, and I'm looking.
So just to keep things on track. So what I can do next is I will copy from the Unified Development Regs the requirements for the PUD and site plan, and forward those to Mr. Fuller so that he can then decide if he would like to continue forward with this project.
Yep.
That's good. So, Mr. Fuller, are you happy with, well, happy is the wrong word. Where did he go?
He just dropped off.
Okay. I was just wanted to know if if our target date was gonna work for him, so I assume it will since he didn't speak up. All right, so we're gonna move on. Sorry, Willowell folks that we're getting to at 8:46. Permit number 21300 Willowell Foundation at Harvey Road. Parcel number 090265.11 requesting conditional use approval for an education facility for the Bristol Unified Development Regulations, Article 3, Section 350. So who's here for Willowell?
I'm Tasha Ball. I'm
Hi,
the
Tasha.
Administrative Director at the Willowell Foundation.
Okay, you want to take us through your project, your proposal, please?
Yeah, and this is John Turner, Wild Roots Farm,
Hi, John.
who's the landowner.
Okay.
So the Willowell Foundation runs a licensed preschool that it's in its 12th, or maybe I've lost track, 12th year. Currently running in New Haven, and we have to move it, and we're proposing to move it to Bristol to the Wild Roots Farm. It's a fully licensed 4-star pre-K program. So we're following all of the Department of Children and Families and the CDC guidelines in terms of health and management and strict regulations in terms of childcare ratios. And we're asking to, I think it's Chris, what exactly is it? We're asking for a special use for preschool to be on this property at Harvey Road.
Yeah, a conditional use.
Conditional use.
We're in the RA5, is that right, Chris?
That is correct.
RA5 is on page 26 of our new regs.
That is correct.
Haven't quite learned where things are yet with these. So conditional use under RA5, one of the available uses is educational facility, and that's what you're seeking approval for, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, and your initial plan is to move the school into an existing building, is that right?
Correct. Yep.
And so you'd have parking out by the road, off-street parking. You'd have to create a parking area, is that right?
Most of it, a lot of it is already created, but yeah, John can speak more to that. There's a lot of land there and there's a lot of area for parking. How many spots are currently there?
Can I just point out, Kevin? I very much doubt there's anybody here, but you want to just ask whether there's any interested party here?
Yeah, you're right. Thanks for the reminder. Well, and I guess we can do that at any time, but now's as good a time as any. Is there anybody in attendance here that is in the immediate or thinks they may be in the immediate neighborhood of this project? Okay.
You're covered.
All right. Thanks for the reminder, Tom. And where's Ted? Ted,
I'm here.
you let me down, man.
Well,
Tasha, raise your right hand.
So now we have somebody else to point out your shortcomings to you, Kevin.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not alone.
It's a stupid thing, but the courts will really go down on that interested party thing. You just have to be careful.
But also I didn't swear anybody. So Tasha and John, raise your right hand, please. You're going to testify. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under the pains of penalty of perjury that the evidence you shall get before this Development Review Board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Gosh, Ted, man, my wingman. Yeah, I give you one job. All right, sorry to have forgotten about that. I do that a lot and I'm not sure why. Anyway, so Chris, do they need a curb cut from the town?
Nope.
No? Okay. And so how much parking do they need, Chris?
So based on the numbers provided when Tasha and I spoke, they
You base it off students
Yeah, so.
and employees, right?
Yeah, that's all that we really have to account for. And Tasha, how many employees did you say it was usually?
It's 4 teachers a day and 15 students.
So they need 1 spot for every 4 students. So they need 4 for the kids and 4 for the staff, faculty and staff. So they need 8 total spots.
Okay.
I bet most of these kids aren't driving.
If they're
I hope
old
not.
enough to drive and they're in preschool, they are developmentally delayed.
We've got bigger issues.
Yeah. That's right.
So that 8 spaces is a lot.
So, and so how many spaces are you intending to create on John or Tasha?
So down in our lower pasture area, we currently have space for about 17 to 20 vehicles, depending on how they park. And up top, we have space for a dozen vehicles.
When you say up top,
Yeah,
is
great
that
shape.
is that right off of Harvey? Well, I'm looking at the various maps that Tasha or someone gave us. I see the parking area and it's at the intersection of Sherman's Lane and Harvey Road.
That's
Yes,
going to
sir.
be the main parking area.
All right, and how many spots were you saying would be there, John?
17 to 20, depending on how people choose to park.
Okay, so that's enough in and of itself, right, Chris?
That is correct.
Yeah, okay.
John, is that an area that you plow now for parking, or you don't, only if you need to?
Only if we need to. I bring my tractor down there when I need to, but for the most part, I mean, the driveway itself on Sherman's Lane is maintained, but the space where the parking is, only if we need to, we
And
clear
on
it out.
as needed basis, okay.
Yes, sir.
John, do you have ADA parking spots up near the house? I didn't see that in the maps.
What would be classified as ADA compliant for parking spaces?
I think you have to be 5% grade out to the intended spot. So you have to have a route of access from your building, a ramp or whatever it is to get into the building. And then no excess of 5% at the parking spot.
So
Slope.
the grade
And
is definitely less than 5% from the parking area to the structure.
Okay.
There is not a ramp there though, specifically to get into the structure.
The structures itself is an ADU.
Yeah, and I think Division of Fire and Safety would be the governing
That's
body.
their
on-
purview for that.
Yeah,
They've already been out and they've given us a list and it's pretty simple. And we're
Okay.
already working our way through it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Josh was out last week.
I have a question. What is further up Sherman's Lane past the proposed school location?
So there is just wooded land. So if you follow Sherman's Lane all the way up, you'll see that there's the structures on the left and the structures on the right, which would be the north and the south side of Sherman's Lane. The further you go is, I believe, land that's owned by the Puritans. And if you go north of that, that's land that's owned by the Thomases. And if you go further east, that's now owned by the Mastersons. So it's just wooded roads, old forest roads that go through that area.
Okay.
Can you let him out?
So
please?
may I ask,
Go ahead.
so are we really just approving a use or change of use here? Is
Yeah,
that what
we're-
this is?
right,
It's
so
not a
Conditional
building for
use.
sure.
This is what's called conditional use.
Conditional
John.
use.
Yeah, so in every zone, there's uses by right, which are permitted uses. They just need a zoning permit. And then
So
then in each district, there's a list of conditional uses, which are possible with or without conditions. So they're potentially acceptable. And so those are by use. And so this is a
Right.
use for an existing building. And so we'd be approving this use of the existing building as an educational facility. And it's one of the available options in this zone.
So Kevin, one question for all of us to just remind us, this will run with the land, even if
Yes.
substantial is sold, but it would be extinguished if they cease to use it at some point, right?
Yeah,
Or maybe not.
Well,
I think our regs have it listed that if it's a use is abandoned for 2 years, then it's no longer a.
that's what I was thinking. That's what it used to be. And that's what's
That's-
typical is there's usually an abandonment provision. but I wasn't confident enough of my command of the new regs to answer the question with confidence.
Yeah, I've read them, and I think it's a little bit vague as to whether a non-conforming use or a conditional use would both expire after 2 years. But I think the better
Yeah.
reading is both. Yeah.
Right, and so this is certainly, a conditional use is a conforming use.
Yeah.
Whereas zoning tries to eliminate non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures over time. And one of the ways it does it is with the abandonment or extinguishment provisions where once the use is discontinued, it can't be revived after a certain period. But that's not an issue with a conditional use, but I think there is a disuse per time limit on it where it would disappear over time. Which wouldn't prevent it from being renewed, whereas if it was.
No, not at all. It's a condition as long as they meet the
Yeah,
conditions.
if a non-conforming use expires, you don't get to revive it. Any other questions for John or Tasha? Brenda?
I was just, a couple of things I was wondering. So the main parking area, you said, how big is it? You said so many cars can fit in there, but what's the approximate size of it? And the second thing is, where are the 4 regular teachers planning to park in that area? And how far is that from the school building? You seem to be assuming that that the students are going to be walking across some sort of path to get there. How far is that?
So in our lower pasture area, the parking space that we use for gatherings that we have, as far as on-farm education is concerned, is roughly 500 feet long. And it goes back inboard, so a car can pull into it perpendicular to the road, no problem.
Or
There's
parallel?
plenty. Say again now, sir?
You saying parallel or perpendicular?
Both. It could.
Okay.
It could. So it's deep enough that a car could be perpendicular, but most
Got
times
it.
people park parallel. And then up top, the driveway is probably about 250 feet long, and that would be parallel parked. Plus if you look at the map, if you follow Sherman's Lane, there's a grassy area just west of where the gate is, where the property boundary is. And that is roughly 40 feet wide by probably about 100 feet long, which is where there's additional parking up there.
So people can, so Brenda raised a point that I was unclear about or unaware of, is are students, these little kids trekking from the parking area at the junction of Harvey Road and Sherman Lane to the proposed school, or are they getting dropped off up at the school and people park elsewhere?
They're getting dropped off at the school up top. But then depending on what time of the day it is, when the kid drop off is, they might get dropped off down below, depending on if that's where the teachers have brought the students for the morning. Because how our property is laid out, we have an upper area and a lower area, and we have farm animals, and we have different outdoor educational spaces. So it's really situationally dependent on where the teachers are for that moment. But the main drop off is going to be up top, yes.
Okay.
That means next to the school building.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that where the teachers will be parking as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, that solves that.
So Josh, John, what am I looking at on the map just east of the parking area at Sherman's Road and Harvey Lane? It's a interesting configuration. It looks like trails cut or design cut? What is it?
Is it greenhouse? Is that what you're seeing?
I don't know. It's something on the landscape that has like a forked shape and
Yes.
various rows. What is it?
So that's a 3,600 square foot forest garden. It's a perennial food system that we have cut trails into and just mulched with wood chips. And it's just various food growing species of shrubs and trees and such. But it's essentially just a space that we utilize as a model for different types of food systems.
Okay.
but that's flat level ground.
No, okay, I just was curious what it was, if that was part of the educational facility or,
No, that's a 30-foot by 60-foot greenhouse. So we do use that for educational purposes, yes, but that is not specific for the Wren's
Okay.
Nest
All right.
program.
all right. Any other, John, go ahead.
Yeah, when you say up top, John, I'm looking at that same photograph with the yurt circled on the right, and just on the further right of the yurt, there's sort of a dirt area. Is that what you mean by up top? Is that a driveway there closest to the yurt?
Yes, so there's sufficient parking there for people to park there, but then we have that whole driveway that people can park on. It's wide enough. We've utilized that plenty of times over the years.
So unfortunately,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Unfortunately, his map cut off. If the way Sherman Lane goes, where it stops on the edge of that map, John, about 20, 30 feet, it makes a hard left. And that's where all of a sudden you see the road to start jet back up near the top. It comes back to the yurt.
Okay.
So that Sherman Lane connects, that is like a big looped road right there.
I see. So that's sort of the drop off zone for kids and whatever up there. When you say up top, that's what you mean.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
the other question I have is for Tasha, which is right now you have, I think it's 15 students. Do you see growth happening?
For this year, we don't. And if we were to grow at all, it would just be, we would just add 1 or 2. We wouldn't grow any more than 16 we're beholden to, wastewater permitting and stuff like that, but definitely not this year. And we'd come back for approval for that.
And these kids are little enough that they're not on school buses, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's 3 to 5 year olds.
Okay.
Well, let's stop there a minute because we can give Chris some discretion too. I don't necessarily want them to have to come back if it's 1 or 2 students.
No, they don't have to, for as long as they can fit them in the building.
Exactly, as long as they meet all the regulations. I think we give Chris the authority to. If we grant the non-conforming use, I don't think he should have to come back, Tasha.
They don't. They don't. I think John's quite. There's suggestions in the application that there would be an expansion later with additional building, and they'd have to come for a permit for that.
Right.
But once we approve the use, it doesn't matter how many.
They can do the building, and even the students. I mean, if it became 100 students,
they need a new building permit and a site plan and all that. But whether this existing building has 12 students or 18 doesn't matter as long as we approve the use.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, just to cover it a little bit, you could condition it that they have to meet state guidelines as far as occupancy for an educational facility, and then that punts it back to
that's already in the definition of the educational facility. I just looked it up.
The DCF guidelines in terms of licensing us are so strict. I have a 50-page document that I have to follow in terms of size of building.
I just wanted to take a minute with it so that Chris didn't feel like he had to come back if you hit 18 students or something like that.
Yeah, you don't, because we're just looking at the use itself.
Yeah.
Any other questions for John? Oh, we lost John.
No. Kevin.
Or Tasha?
I have a question for Kevin.
Yes.
Do you want to go through the
Yes, I will. We'll walk our way through, but I wanted all the questions out first.
I was just wondering if we were doing that.
Yeah, we'll streamline it. It's late.
Well, there's section 3.
You need a motion?
Short.
Yeah, no, we have to go through. There are a series of general and specific standards that the state statute requires for conditional use, and our bylaws repeat. And so we have to make findings about them. But I don't proceed down that road until we get all the information out. And I just want to make sure we have all the information out, either from the application before us or questions from the board.
I have one question. not really for the applicants, but is Sherman's Lane a town road or is it a private road?
Sherman's Lane is a private road. Harvey Road is town, and we are private.
Okay. Anything else from any member of the board before we proceed to work our way through the general and specific criteria? All right, then we need to get the information on each of these criteria. Oftentimes many of them don't apply, or some of them don't apply, and that's okay. And then we'll have a motion at the end. So the first general criteria is capacity of community facilities. That means burden on schools, fire, any municipal services, that sort of thing. The conditional use shall not overburden or exhaust existing or planned municipal facilities or services. I don't see any issue there. Does anyone?
No.
Next is character of the area. Conditional use may not by its nature, and I'm in section 355, gang. The conditional use may not by its nature, scale, or conduct cause an undue adverse change to the character of the area as the area would exist if fully developed in accordance with the town plan. To that end, the conditional use shall meet the dimensional setback requirements for the district, sign standards, and any other performance standards in the regulations. And we've got a 65-acre, country property and a use in an existing building. Does anybody see any issues with character of the area?
The animals don't mind, we don't.
No, I mean, the only character seems to be knowing the mission of Willow Well and its outdoor emphasis and nature emphasis. It seems quite in keeping with the character.
I agree.
Yes. Absolutely.
Next, go ahead.
How many acres did you say?
I thought I said 65.
That's an error. I just want to, since I swore to honesty, I think it's
Yeah.
a 10 acre.
Okay, maybe I have the parcel wrong on the parcel map. Chris, I thought it said 65 acres.
65 acres is the parcel just northeast of us. We have
Okay,
10.
got it. Okay.
Not to complicate things, just in the essence
Well,
of.
thanks for the correction. I was operating under a
And that might end up in the resolution, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, thanks for clearing that up. In any event, we've got a 10-acre parcel.
10.4 to be exact.
Okay, and this is RA5, so it's a 5-acre minimum. So it's a conforming lot. We're twice the size of the minimum. Does anybody see any issue with character of the area?
No.
No, okay. Next is traffic. The estimated traffic generated by a conditional use shall not exhaust or exceed the capacity of the road to accept increased traffic unless the applicant agrees to a condition requiring the applicant to upgrade the road. Doesn't seem like a heck of a lot of traffic. It's pedestrian, it's just regular cars. It's not heavy duty vehicles, and it's a private road that handles farm traffic already. Does anybody see any issue with traffic?
No.
Compliance with these regulations, must comply with the regulations in effect at the time of submission of the application. Well, it's a conditional use in this zone. So I don't see any conflict with any regulation. You're not aware of any, are you, Chris?
Nope.
Okay. Last is renewable energy resources. This one often just is inapplicable. The conditional use shall not excessively inhibit or restrict access to or the use of renewable natural resources, including but not necessarily limited to water and sunlight for energy generation. So I don't see how it's an existing building. It's just a change of use in that building. Now, I don't see any issue with it. Inhibition or restriction of access to renewables.
You guys aren't using a spring or anything like that for water, are you?
No, we have a dug well, and then we have 21 solar panels and plenty of access for more if we needed them.
Great.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to section 656, which is what are called the site-specific criteria for review. And the first is demonstrating adequate circulation of traffic on the site, the street and the site, the proposed traffic, parking, all those things. Anybody see, we probably discussed that as much as anything in this application. Does anybody see an issue with, let's call it traffic flow and parking?
Oh,
Okay. Safe pedestrian connections to on-site parking areas and to existing or planned pedestrian facilities located on adjacent properties or along public roads shall be provided. So we've got drop off. We got drop off for the kids on site near the yurt, and we have parking near the yurt, and also quite a bit of parking where Sherman Road meets the other road, Hadley Road. Anybody see any issues with respect to, pedestrian safety with respect to parking and getting to and from the school?
No.
Applicant shall demonstrate they've incorporated landscaping features into a design to reduce any impacts on the use of the property might have on neighboring properties and that will enhance the appeal of the use proposed. So here we've got an existing building. We're just changing the use, and it's a pretty good size piece of property. So I don't see how there'd be any impact, aesthetic impact on to adjoining properties. Does anybody feel differently? Outdoor storage of trash will be screened or hidden from public view. We haven't talked about that. Is there a good dumpster? Tasha?
There's not a dumpster yet.
Will there be a dumpster?
I think that there probably should be. We haven't talked to John, actually. We haven't talked about that, but where we are now, we have a dumpster. They take the trash out daily per the licensing regulations. So John,
Probably don't generate that much trash. So what do you have there now, John?
Right now we have, I don't know if it shows up in that photo of the map. That one kind of looked outdated, but we do have a shed space, and on the back side of the shed is where we put our own home trash and recycling. And we compost as much food as possible, either to give to our pigs, chickens, or to turn back into soil. We recycle most stuff, and so it's relatively neat. Yeah, I guess if we needed to get a dumpster, we could, and we would have space for it, certainly.
Well,
Tasha, does your daycare requirements have you putting trash in a special place separate from the kids for regular trash?
just closed, not for, like, the bathroom trash is wide open, and just that we take it out daily.
But not on the site, not in regards to the site.
Site is fine now, they're totally.
But so then when you take it out, it goes to the trash receptacles on the backside of John's shed?
They
Yes.
haven't discussed it yet.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so,
Okay with that.
I mean, if it's on the backside of the shed, given the area of this, given the neighborhood, it sounds like that's screened from public view as far as I can tell.
Yes, sir.
Anybody feel differently?
Nope.
And just one reminder too, when it comes to screening from the public view, John still lives on this property as well, so he has to look at all this, so.
Yeah, but now there's gonna be sparkles and glitter and hot glue dripping out of those trash cans.
I got that going on right now as it is with my own kids.
No, you don't have any in your beard. I would, maybe if we
Not
look
today.
closely, yeah. Building design, applicant shall demonstrate how the structure they're proposing fits within the character of the area. It's already an existing structure, so we can skip that. We're not in the village planning area, so we can skip that. And we're not creating any new construction, so we don't have to talk about, or impervious areas, so we don't have to talk about stormwater. Well, actually, I guess we're creating a parking area, and that's gonna be, are you gonna gravel that, John?
It's currently gravelled.
Oh, okay, so,
Yes, sir. The photo that was up previously, that's definitely an outdated photo, but we do have gravel driveway in the upper area, and the lower area has been gravel as
yeah,
well.
well, you've got
I'm looking it
a,
on a Google Maps and it looks great.
yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Any exterior lighting for this, no? Noise. You have to meet the decibel requirements. I don't know if screaming kids, I don't know.
They got 10 acres, there's enough.
Yeah,
room.
that's probably enough. And I don't know where those come in, and it's measured at the property line, so you're all right.
And they're all wearing masks now, so it's muffling it
Yeah.
a little bit more for them, so.
Yeah, so signs, if you have signs, you gotta meet the sign regulation.
Back for that another time.
Hours of operation shall conform with 754. I don't know what 754 says. I gotta look.
Not before 6 or after 10 at night.
Yeah, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Don't worry.
All right, if you're doing preschool outside those area times, I feel really sorry for you. And you're not in an overlay district, so we don't have to think about that. So that concludes the site-specific criteria. Any other questions?
I'll move approval without any separate specific conditions.
I second.
Well, one of them would be, if we want them to have parking, we should have as a condition that we should tell them what the parking out by the road is, because I guess I'm not clear. Does that parking already exist, John, or does it need to be
I
created?
think he said it exists.
It's fully created?
Yes, sir, it is. Both in the
Okay.
upper area and the lower area is created.
All right, so then the only amendment, Tom, I would say to have the parking be provided as submitted in the application.
Nope, no problem.
Okay, with that clarification, I'll second Tom's motion. Any further debate?
I have a question. If they
Okay.
didn't seem to say anything about parking in the application.
Well, there's pictures and
Yeah,
it
there's a
shows the,
picture, but it doesn't, I mean, the parking next to the school building is not mentioned.
I think our primary parking is going to be down below.
Brenda,
Yeah,
you're
but
correct. It wasn't mentioned up at the primary, the structure.
They
I
have
think
so much-
what came to light is part of the parking is at the lower lot and part of it is at the upper lot.
And that might be put into the statement, whatever.
go ahead, John.
So there is, and based off the standards that you had suggested earlier, there is sufficient amount of parking in the upper area. It's just we have additional overflow parking down below if for whatever reason we do need it.
Okay,
There will be
My
a
sense of it, my sense of this is that it's a 10-acre site. There's quite a bit of parking when you're looking at this. I'm totally comfortable with them being at their own discretion to park, where they want. I don't think there's any problem that the people gonna lack of parking or would ever get off site or anything. So
No,
I
my
think
worry-
we really,
My worry was just that he said in the application, and as far as I could tell, it said very little.
yeah,
about
no, I was
Fair
speaking
point.
to the designated area and I overspoke with respect to the others. Tasha, you had something to say?
it was a while ago. I don't remember, but just one. I know you guys want to get this over, but in our regulations that we ask our families, we ask all parents to back into their parking spots too, just for safety in terms of small humans and knowing what's behind you. So when you pull out, you can see everything. That's in our school policy. So just so that's, we're
Okay,
pretty aware of parking and the importance.
Yes. So Kevin, I would suggest that in the, the permit that we specify that they have to maintain at least 8 parking spaces. And that'll
okay.
cover it.
Actually, instead of that they have to conform to the parking standards of the unified. Because if they go to 24 people, then they
Right.
need more than 8. So would that make more sense, Ted?
Yeah, it would.
Okay, so the motion is to approve with the condition that they provide parking spaces as required by the zoning bylaws, which are driven in part by enrollment.
Okay.
Okay,
Any further debate or on the motion? And you have a second, right? I think I seconded it.
Josh did, I think you did. I had a whole bunch of seconds on it.
All right, good. All right, all those in favor, raise your hand so I can count. Aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7-0. So it's unanimous, and I will issue a written decision, but you already know the decision. We've got,
Thank you.
you know,
Thank
we
you
have,
very much.
I'll try to get that out promptly, and the outer limit is 45 days, but I rarely bump up against that. And this one's not a hard one to write, so it should be a lot quicker.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone.
Yes, thank
All
you very
right.
much.
Thank you for being patient too.
Yeah, sorry to
Good
make you wait
luck.
too long. All
thank
right,
you, everybody. Good night, all.
I think
Thanks,
that- I
folks.
think that's it. Let's
Oh,
adjourn.
What-
I wanted to
just-
say, before, not for the guests, but for the rest of the board, Kevin, thank you for the summary. Very,
Oh, good.
very,
You're
very
welcome.
helpful.
And we can
Yeah.
always add to it. Yes, Chris.
And one other thing that transpired yesterday and today, email communication amongst the board. If you have questions, like if I send out documents, don't reply all. That
Yeah, you're right.
open meeting laws don't like that. If you have a question pertaining to the submission I sent to you, send it to me. If I need to resubmit more data out to the group, I will.
Yeah,
But-
good reminder. Yep.
Yep, I did that. Sorry.
No,
I
I
know.
think I did too.
It's all good. Everyone does it all the time, and it's just I'll remind you when it
It's a-
happens.
It's a good reminder. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we can adjourn. We all agree?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. We'll see you at the next meeting, gang. Thanks very
Thank you all.
much. Good
Yeah,
night.
bye.
Right.
Good
And
night.
the
night.
next meeting is when?
It'll be the 13th is, let me just put my calendar.
In April, right?
Yes, I do not have anything unless you want to have a working meeting amongst yourselves for the 23rd, so.
Okay.
And just a heads up, you have at least one, if not two applications for that, plus Mr. Fuller's continuation, so. Come prepared.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, guys and women.